If you use the internet in any way, whether you're on social media or only use email, you've probably experienced what is called clickbait. This may be a title or a headline or an image of some sort that is specifically designed to pique your interest and get you to click on a link that will take you to a web page filled with advertising that may have very little actual content. One common trick of the people who engineer clickbait is to frame promised content as a specific list of some number of things that you might want to know. So if you've seen a link with a name like 11 things you didn't know about some celebrity, you've seen clickbait. And sometimes they tempt you a bit more with an additional phrase like, number 9 will shock you. Obviously, there's a lot about this that is dishonest. It plays on our curiosity to trick us into looking at adverts, wasting our time and energy in the process. However, some people have learned from how effectively clickbait works. So there are also some legitimate websites and blogs that give their articles similar titles. One such person is leadership author and church planter Carey Nieuwhof. For many years now, he's run a website with over 1,000 of his own articles, as well as almost 600 podcasts, based on his own experience as a minister. And yes, he gives his articles titles such as 4 Reasons Why People Are Leaving the Church, 5 Ways to Abolish a Scarcity Mindset at Your Church, and 14 Church Growth Strategies That Cost Nothing. These are actual titles of his, with a mix of opinions on things that congregations are doing well and, quite frankly, things that they're doing badly. Nieuwhof uses the word church, by the way, because he's a Christian minister and he's primarily writing for other Christian leaders, but almost everything he writes applies to religious communities in general. In his article on 14 church growth strategies, for instance, there's only one that doesn't really translate to a non-Christian setting. I've certainly got a lot out of many of his articles over the years, but there was one recently that gave me some difficulty. Now, I was struggling with a number of other things at the same time, and when I saw that Nieuwhof's new article was called 13 Signs Your Church is Dying, I'd had enough bad news in the world, so I had to push back. I mean, he does make some valid points about what holds congregations back, from your church is afraid of innovation and change, and maintenance is overtaking church mission, to everyone in your church looks and thinks like you, and your church has no presence in the community. But in the face of so much doom and gloom, I needed something more hopeful. So without overthinking it, I inverted every sign Nieuwhof lists in his article and came up with 13 signs your church is alive instead. Obviously, I don't intend for this list for congregations to compare how many signs they each have. I don't want to hear anyone say, well, First Church has only 7 out of 13 signs, but here at All Souls, we have 10 out of 13, so we must be more alive than them. No. Rather, if a congregation realizes for itself that it could do better in some area of church life, then these signs mark a way forward rather than marking the church as dying. This morning, then, we're going to consider how these 13 signs your church is alive relate to our efforts to live into our vision for the UUFP. First, though, we're going to sing, followed by our blessing of the backpacks. So here's what I got when I inverted every sign of a dying church that Carey Nieuwhof lists in his article, giving us 13 signs your church is alive. 1, your leaders sustain their passion. 2, Your church embraces innovation and change. 3, church leadership is prioritized over church management. 4, mission is more central than maintenance. 5, your church embraces diverse leaders and talent. 6, younger leaders are lifted up. 7, personal spiritual lives are encouraged. 8, your staff and members have healthy energy and priorities. 9, not everyone in your church looks and thinks just like you. 10, your church's finances are healthy. 11, your church has an active presence in the community. 12, you're focused on reaching new people, not just on keeping church members. 13, you view every change in culture as an opportunity for your church. Now, for the sake of this homily, I'm going to consider these signs in groups. First, your leaders sustain their passion, and mission is more central than maintenance. I've put these together because leadership, passion, and mission go together. It's mission that brings life to a congregation. And few people are passionate about merely maintaining some organization that already exists. Consider what Rebecca Parker experienced when she asked new people to be an active and meaningful part of the congregation. Nearly everyone said yes. The church began to grow. Our sense of shared mission deepened, anchored in the longings of heart that had brought each person there. Everything a congregation does is based in its mission. Some years ago, we figured out that the mission of the UUFP is to grow in wonder, connect in love, engage in service, and inspire generosity. And our vision then answers the question, given who we are now, what do we need to do in the coming years to become the congregation our mission calls us to be? Given who we are now, what do we need to do to become the congregation our mission calls us to be? This is where the second group of signs comes in. Church leadership is prioritized over church management. Your church has an active presence in the community. You're focused on reaching new people, not just on keeping current church members. I like the explanation of the difference between leadership and management that says that management is doing things right, but leadership is doing the right things. Our vision describes a number of right things for us to do, such as we have larger, flexible, inspirational spaces, and we practice universal site design. These are about having more room for worship, music, religious exploration, and small groups, with attractive indoor and outdoor spaces that are accessible, flexible, and have the technology that we need. But they're not just for us, not just for those of us who are here now, but for the wider community. So our vision also says we practice social justice, and we are more visible, offering our campus for diverse community uses, hosting public events, and showing people who need us, who we are as the UUFP, and why we are here. To paraphrase what Rebecca Parker realized about the importance of active outreach, what our congregation does, what it stands for, and why it exists matter profoundly. We have the gifts and resources that people truly need. It behooves us to open our doors more proactively, to invite people in. Now, Parker explains how people come to church for life and death reasons. And that brings us to another sign. Personal spiritual lives are encouraged. Our vision says we have spiritual development groups, and not just fellowship circles or classes about spirituality, but shared places for people to engage in spiritual practices. This has actually been part of our covenant as an interdependent UU community for 40 years in what's known as the third principle. We covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. I'll come back to the acceptance of one another part next, but given our theological diversity as UUs, we've had a hard time with the spiritual growth part. As a religious community, though, developing our own connections with what is both within us and beyond us should be amongst our highest priorities. The next group of signs is about the acceptance of one another part of our third principle. Your church embraces diverse leaders and talent. Younger leaders are lifted up. Not everyone in your church looks and thinks just like you. Our vision puts this pretty clearly. We have a more diverse congregation in terms of age, race, sexuality, and so on, and specifically by being more child, teen, and family friendly. I've long had a problem with the word acceptance. It's a pretty low bar. To me, it sounds like we'll agree to merely put up with someone. The old Unitarian word tolerance isn't much better. Rather, we need to actively embrace one another, lifting each other up, celebrating our beautiful differences, and encouraging everyone to make the most of their gifts. Rebecca Parker describes how she did this when she realized that newcomers expected a church to do great things. I responded by asking them to help rebuild our small congregation, to teach Sunday school, to serve on the Social Justice Committee, to sing in the choir, to help us raise money for the Committee on Relief. Nearly everyone said yes. The last group of signs is about this too. Your church embraces innovation and change. Your staff and members have healthy energy and priorities. Your church's finances are healthy. These aren't the purpose of a religious community, but they do allow a congregation to do great things because they support the mission. So our vision says we have plans and funds for development, and we have more functional support staff. This isn't maintaining an old organization, see sign number 4, but adapting to a changing world and making the most of new ideas. Now, I know some of you have been counting. I know some of you have. And you've counted only 12 signs so far. So here's number 13. You view every change in culture as an opportunity for your church. The world is always changing. Our society has a romantic view of church life that really only comes from the 1950s, when engagement with congregational life peaked. Apart from a small span of years, it was never true, nor has it been true since, that everyone's family went to church, that everyone came to social events, that people were lining up to join committees and fighting over who got to pass the collection plate or put flowers on the altar. And we are Unitarian Universalists. Our understanding that the world is always changing is baked into the DNA of liberal religion. We also know that to be relevant and effective and comforting and meaningful, how we serve our mission must adapt too. We've never been a religion that acts like everything has always been the same and everything will always be the same and anything else is a threat. Even our vision changes over time. Remember, I said that our vision answers the question, given who we are now, what do we need to do in the coming years to become the congregation our mission calls us to be? We last articulated our vision in 2019. And I don't know about you, but I have a hard time remembering much about 2019. Thanks to the fact that we had an awful political situation and a global pandemic, and so much has changed. Are you the same person you were in 2019? Is the UUFP the same congregation we were in 2019? No, we are not. We've made progress. And so our vision of how we get from who we are now to the congregation our mission calls us to be, our vision can't be the same as it was in 2019 either. Next year, since it will have been 5 years, we'll articulate a new vision. I urge you to be part of that process next summer, especially now that you know these signs of an alive church. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Lynn will also put each question on the screen as I ask it. I wonder what you try to do with your faith, your convictions, your loyalties. I wonder what you have perceived in our heart's own song. I wonder what great things you believe our congregation can do. I wonder what you can do to open our doors and invite people in. The problem with lists is that they always leave something out, even very simple lists. My parents used to have a ritual that when my father was heading to work, my mother would say, keys, wallet, teeth. He needed his keys and his wallet, of course, and since he'd taken a cricket ball to the mouth when he was younger, he also needed to make sure he had his false teeth. There were other things my father needed too, though. Shoes, for example. But the issue with any list is that you can always add more to it and still have no guarantee that it's complete. Today, we're considering 13 signs your church is alive, but since this is a list, it's incomplete. I know for a fact that there are other signs not amongst those 13. So I ask you to take some time now to think to yourself about other signs you have noticed that our congregation is alive. Specifically, I invite you to identify just one sign and take a couple of minutes in silence to think about how you would name it in just a few words. Thank you for sharing the signs you've noticed that our congregation is alive. I have one more such sign to offer too, and that I can articulate it now is thanks to the Southern Region's Reverend Byron Tyler Coles, who is our guest preacher next Sunday. Relationships are prioritized over programs. Obviously, congregations have programs, from everything that happens on Sunday mornings to various workshops, classes, and events at other times of the week. But the point of being a religious community is not to have programs. Rather, programs are a means to another end. So why do we have programs? Many of our programs are about Unitarian Universalism itself. It would be weird if they weren't, because we are a UU congregation after all. But teaching people, filling them up with information, that isn't the point. There are so many excellent books and videos and articles out there that you can learn almost anything you want, anytime you want. Neither are programs merely about entertainment, under which I include the old saw of intellectual stimulation. You can get much better entertainment in many places outside our walls, including your own home, thanks to TV and the internet. Church programs are about lots of different things, but one thing they all have in common, whether it's learning something or being entertained, is that you're part of programs with other people. That's really the point of every program, workshop, class, potluck, or social event, to bring people together to get to know one another better and to figure out how we can all be better at human relationships. People might first come to church for any one of a number of personal reasons or causes, but what keeps them coming back to church is building relationships with other people in the congregation. This is why I harp on about community so much. It's literally in our mission to connect in love, and it's in our vision for how we do a better job of living into our mission. It's why we have a covenant. It's why we have, yes, programs and a building and committees and a budget. But the point of all of it is to practice community, which is to say, to figure out how to be better at human relationships as deeply and as thoroughly as we can, both within and beyond our walls. May we bring this congregation more and more alive through our passion and our leadership, our commitment to spirituality and diversity, our embrace of innovation and opportunity, and our centering of the importance of human relationships in community. May it be so.